Well, welcome back to another of the essentials, according at least to our book, 52 Weeks of Essential Movies. We're catching up after a couple of weeks, missing some stuff. Yesterday we watched Dr. Strangelove, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb, which is obviously a title that tells you it is a comedy.
Right, right. It's definitely a comedy.
Well, you told me yesterday that you were not sure that you'd have realized it was a comedy, except at times, you had it going in your head at the start.
Right. And we mentioned that, I thought that was maybe because of some of the things that would have been considered normal at that time I wouldn't necessarily have recognized as normal, and so I wouldn't have known if they were being made fun of. I think that there are a couple moments that definitely give you the big clue that it's a comedy, but I think that it's a subtle sort of tone at the beginning, and then it's like once you get into it, it's like, oh, this is not really dramatic. This is not really a action war film.
Yeah. Have you seen Failsafe?
No.
Oh, well, see, this is a good companion for the movie Failsafe because it's basically the same story, only told from a very serious point of view. The idea that there's an accidental launch of a nuclear war and you're going to get started in it. This, of course, is much more satirical in nature, and it's funny, very funny.
Yes.
But it's not the kind of laugh provoker that you get with most comedies nowadays, where it's joke, 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 joke,
Right.
joke.
Right.
There's not a lot of that kind of stuff. It's sarcastic and satire humor that you're getting when George C. Scott can't take the call because he's in the bathroom for the whole time, and his secretary, who is basically in her skimpies or her bathing suit, keeps trying to convey information. That's a pretty good tip that we're looking at this through a skewed view of the world.
And I think that was actually kind of the first scene where I felt it was comedic, and it was obviously comedic.
Mm-hmm.
The opening, I know that the opening's supposed to be the song with the refueling
Of the plane.
Yeah, but I did not get that right away. So it wasn't until that scene with his secretary that I was like, oh, okay.
Anyway, yeah, it's definitely a conversation about the times that we're going through. The Cold War is at its peak, and the Russians and the Americans. The use of the hotline was one of those things that was fairly new. The hotline had just been developed a couple of years before, after the whole incident with the Cuban Missile Crisis. They decided they need to have more certain ways of communicating. That's when Failsafe came up, which is a very similar story where the president is on the phone for a big chunk of the time talking to the Russian premier, and we never see the Russians. We just hear the other end of the phone line conversation. And this has the same plot, basically, only they're just exactly opposite in tone. Henry Fonda is the president in Failsafe, and I'm sure he's done some comedies. I can think of a couple off the top of my head, but he's never the comedian. He's usually the straight guy, and Peter Sellers is both the comedian and the straight guy in this, delivering lines in all three characters that he plays in amusing ways.
Yes.
So.
And I did think once you got into the war room, that was also very clearly comedic, and the general trying to explain what happened, and the president asking, wait, you're telling me that we can't get this person on the phone? Like, again and again and again, the general saying, well, this is what's happened, and if you remember, and I thought that was a very funny scene.
Well, the general's trying to cover his butt in every way he can possibly do so. I thought, since you mentioned the war room, I went to that Kubrick exhibit at the museum a couple of years ago, and they had all the designs up there. Did the design of the war room look familiar to you at all? Had you seen anything that looked like that?
Not off the top of my head.
Well, it's designed by Ken Adams, who did all the James Bond movies, and so it's like some of those same kinds of things where people are sitting around in a big room in Thunderball, for instance, or
yeah, I could see that.
That scene in Dr. No where it's kind of the circular place where the professor comes and gets the tarantula and gets his directions from Dr. No. That's one of those Ken Adams touches in that whole room, which is basically dark except right in the center area, and then the big board in the back. And the big board is their attempt to visualize what the war room looks like. I don't know that anybody knows that that's exactly what it looks like, but I think that set the standard for years and years. Have you seen War Games?
Yes.
Yeah, similar kind of thing. I think
that's what I thought.
Yeah, I don't know that that's what the room would look like, but everybody assumes that it does look like that, and it may very well be because Ken Adams designed it. I don't know if he designed the real war room. So, well, it's got some actors in it that are pretty well known and important. George C. Scott is, for a long period of time, he was my favorite actor. He played Patton in the movies, and won the Academy Award for that. He plays General Turgison, who's the one who's given all the excuses there. And he was not known as a comedian, but he was pretty darn funny in this. Yeah. And of course, we talked a little bit last night about Sterling Hayden, who plays General Ripper, who apparently has gone off his mind and is worried about his body essences.
And that was actually one of those things that is supposed to be funny, I think, but I was more terrified by the fact that his paranoia had taken over that way than... I didn't find it as funny. I found the other Peter Sellers character's response, that was, comedic and light, but his kind of paranoia, I was like, oh, this is when it can go wrong. This is when that kind of mentality can push you to do scary things. Mm-hmm. And so even though it is supposed to be kind of like, isn't this so crazy that he would think of this kind of thing? It was like,
Well, I'll tell you, one of the things that's true is that there were a lot of people who were worried about fluoridating the water and saw it as maybe kind of a conspiracy sort of thing. They're worried that we're being medicated by the government, and so there are a lot of them who saw conspiracies and that kind of thing. So that's not atypical. And by the way, it's not atypical today. You find the same kind of stuff. The world's full of people who assume the government's behind everything that makes them nervous, and whether it's vaccines or
I think that's
the banking system or...
I think that's what made me go, I know those people today, and it's not funny. It's kind of scary that people think that, which is why I was thinking in the movie, that's a little creepy that that's where his mind goes. And
it's a general who's in charge of
who's in charge
nuclear weapons.
Yeah,
there.
Exactly.
That's
the connection. That's when it gets scary. Not if you were just some normal person, be like, oh, okay, you're just crazy, but you have nuclear weapons.
I like all the procedural stuff that tries to make it very real. The guys in the plane, for instance, they go through very technical procedures when they get the message that they're supposed to go forward. So everybody's got a job to do. They've got a checklist to do. They double check everything. They go through this. They've got a counter on the panel that tells them whether or not this is the correct code. They've got a code book that's marked top secret. The code books are locked up in the safe. Yeah. Everybody's got a different combination to get access to those kinds of things. And you see a lot of that stuff. That's all supposed to be command and control stuff so that to keep these kinds of things from happening. Right. And I'm sure that we've seen other movies. I don't know if you and I have seen these movies together, where I know I've seen plenty of them where they go through these elaborate procedures to keep, accidental launches to a minimum. There always have to be two people involved, pushing the button, turning keys simultaneously. That they have to cross code and do all those kinds of things. And we've seen it, I think, in The Hunt for Red October and Crimson Tide. You see it in there was we saw. We were talking about War Games, and that's actually the opening of the movie where they go through that whole procedure and they're cracking open the codes and looking at things and double checking. I just thought it was interesting how mechanical it all is. Whether it's a test or whether it's not, they're doing their job.
Right.
None of that is really funny.
and that's kind of what I was talking about with not knowing whether or not it was a comedy, because there are those moments where it's very real and there's not a comedic tone to the scene. You get a little bit of funniness with, are you sure that we've never gotten an order from them like that before, and that back and forth. But yeah, they're going through the code book, they're flipping all the switches, and everything's very serious, and they're going to do this.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting that I think a lot of people's image of the movie is Slim Pickens at the end riding the bomb down, and so they think, well, the whole crew is a little crazy. He's got his cowboy hat, so maybe. But there's not much comedy in the plane at all. The only reason he happened to be there is because he's desperate to try and open the door. It's not like he said, "Oh, let me go back and ride the bomb down."
Right.
That's just all kind of an accidental thing, and they make a joke of it ultimately. But there's not any humor on the plane.
No, yeah. Exactly.
It's not like people are making jokes about the event or situation. They all take it very seriously. So most of the stuff in the plane is very serious. It's all the stuff in the war room and at the air base that gives it its humorous tone.
Right.
So if you were thinking about it being balanced, you've got humor in the war room, humor on the ground at the air base, and then a very serious tone on the plane itself, until that last shot when it kind of says, okay, let's go there too. Once we're out of the plane, then we're going to throw in a little bit of humor.
Right.
So, I mentioned Slim Pickens. We were talking about him last night, that he was in Blazing Saddles we'd seen.
And that's what happened was I heard him talking, and I'm going, I know that voice. And finally I had to ask you, it's like, okay, who is that? And part of it was that I just hadn't gotten a good look at his face until,
he's in a ton of movies in the 60s and 70s. And I'm not sure exactly when he passed away, but he's a good actor, and he was in a lot of westerns. You could tell that he's got kind of a western voice to him with that drawl. So that was I like seeing him. And we mentioned that James Earl Jones is in there.
Yes.
One of the people I didn't mention is Shane Rimmer plays the co-pilot. And Shane Rimmer is one of those guys. He's an American actor who works in London. And he's in like 3 or 4 James Bond movies. He's in Superman movies. I think he's in one of the Star Wars movies. I can't quite remember. He's in Rollerball. He shows up, and he's basically not a lead part. He's always a supporting part. He's still making. He was still making. He was in Batman Begins. I think so. That's the last movie I saw him in. I don't know if he's passed away yet or not. He was quite old when he was in that movie, but similar kind of thing. He's just one of those faces in the background. So that was kind of interesting to see also. And then, of course, the great Peter Sellers, who was amazing in this movie, playing 3 different characters.
Which I didn't even realize until after. I knew that he was in it, and I knew that he was playing the British soldier in the
group captain.
The base, but I thought I remembered something where I saw that he had played the president, and I was watching. I was like, "Is that him? Is that him? I don't know." And then afterwards, I looked it up, and I was like, "Oh yeah, it was him."
Well, he's got the top of his head shaved, and just the hair around the back,
and the glasses,
and he's got a good American accent as the president, a very British accent as the group captain, and of course the over-the-top German accent as Dr. Strangelove himself. That's and I kind of like the way Dr. Strangelove gets introduced. He's just suddenly the president turns and asks a question. It's not like he wasn't there the whole time. He was sitting around the table with them. We never focused on him before until the president asked him a question. Then he wheels back from the table and becomes like one of the main characters in the last third of the movie. So, And of course, that's all comedy gold because
Yes.
he's
his arm that's not happy with him
trying
to not be a Nazi.
Yes, he keeps wanting to give the Nazi salute, and you know, he and the general have very interesting perspectives on the events that are going on. They're always looking for, well, what's the best way that, you know, what's our best scenario?
Yeah.
How can we look at this in a positive? How can we not see this as being a negative thing that the world's about to end? Well, let's find another way to talk about it. And you know, at one point, you probably won't know this, but they mentioned that, you know, we're going to have a mine shaft gap, and the missile gap was a big thing in the 60s, that we're going to be outnumbered by the number of missiles that the Soviets had, so we had to keep up with the amount of weapons that we had to kind of match them. And the same thing with military forces. We don't want to have a naval gap or airplane gap or missile gap, and that became a recurring theme with the military, especially in the 60s, that they needed more money because there was going to be some kind of gap. It was in the presidential debates in 1960, it got mentioned. And so, and people still talk about those kinds of things today, but it's kind of funny that they got at the end and said, oh, we're going to have a mine shaft gap. And, you know, 100 years from now, the Russians are going to be telling us what to do because they were able to breed more and outbreed us, you know, that kind of thing. I thought that was very amusing. But the movie is satirical just everywhere you look. And I like the fact that Keenan Wynn has the line where when he's shooting open the soda machine to get change for the group captain, he says, you know, you're going to have to answer to Coca-Cola.
Yes, yes, I liked that whole exchange.
A little product placement. I'm sure that nobody got paid on that one. I think that's just one of those things. Yeah. So, well, you have any other thoughts about Dr. Strangelove?
No, I enjoyed it. Like I said, I did find it funny, and I did laugh out loud a couple times. I think it's an interesting balance in tone, like we were saying, with the serious moments juxtaposed by the really comedic moments, and then the moments that are sort of comedic but also sort of serious.
Okay. Well, I'm glad that you appreciated Dr. Strangelove after your disappointment in 2001.
Yes.
I'm not disowning you at the moment, but I'll give you penance until the next one that we will watch. The next Kubrick film we have on our list. We'll find something and we'll talk about it then.
Okay.
All right. Well, hope you enjoyed. We're talking about a movie that's almost 50 years old, but it's one of the essentials. It's worth seeing. Thanks.